Welcome to the FNO InsureTech podcast, a place where movers and shakers from all points within the insurance ecosystem gather and discuss all things InsureTech. Here are your hosts, Lee Boyd and Rob Beller.
Hey, podcast world. Welcome to another interesting and unusual episode of FNO InsureTech, your favorite InsureTech podcast. Regardless of what anyone else says, just ask Lee or I.
All I've heard is it's the favorite. It's the favorite. When people walk up to me, they say, your podcast is my favorite. Nobody talks about other podcasts.
No.
They only talk about ours.
No.
So it's obvious.
Like if you say the Kelsey's podcast, they don't know what you're talking about. You say Joe Rogan, they're like, who?
Who? I don't listen to that. FNO InsureTech? Oh, obviously. I listen first thing in the morning. I turn it right on. I listen to all the episodes every day, 7 times in a row.
The Office Ladies. Don't even know what that is.
Never heard of it.
Have you ever heard that podcast, by the way? Office Ladies?
Yeah, one time.
My wife is a listener. Right?
Oh, really? Yeah.
And she tells me all of this, information about the Office Lady podcast. And I'm like,
yeah,
I don't get it.
I don't get it. What about Amy Poehler? Yeah, have you heard?
That's
Amy
another
Poehler's?
one that's super huge. But I can listen to our podcast and get completely filled up.
Well, you can't listen to anyone after us, right? I mean, it's not fair. It's not fair. But I'll tell you, Amy Poehler's a little bit boring.
Really?
You think it's going to be hilarious because it's Amy Poehler. She's hilarious. But she's just like a normal person interviewing normal people. They're all famous, but it's not like knockdown funny like you think it would. It's a great podcast in comparison to ours, but it's not knockout funny.
Yeah. Well, we're always interested in what your favorite our audience favorite podcasts are. So please let us know. Send us an email at FNO InsureTech and let us know who your favorite podcasts are and who we should be copying so ours can be better.
Yeah, and we'll also let you know that we do get a lot of email traffic, so just give us a little bit of time, but we will respond. And so we do our best to respond in 48 hours.
It's so heavy that we need a lot of time. We need a year.
It takes a while. Just know, but we appreciate it. We love your feedback. And,
we do.
And keep it coming.
We do. And here's another interesting thing. What time is it where you are right now, Lee?
That's a great question. It's 7:18 p.m.
Okay, because it's 11:18 a.m. where I am. That's because I'm in California. But where are you?
I'm back in good old London. I'm back in London again.
You're in the heart of insurance. You're in the city of London, aren't you?
Oh, I am in the city of London, where insurance lives in this magical place, the square mile, and everywhere you walk, it's insurance professionals. So
that's really cool. There's no place really like that compares to that in the United States, is there?
No, it is the only place that that you can walk up and down the road and talk insurance with anybody around you, and they're going to know what you're talking about. But it's a great place. It's a great place. Huge buildings, old things, and good friends. I made a lot of good friends here, so that's always a good thing
you've
too.
Been there a bunch of times now. I mean, are you kind of settling in? Is it you know where you are?
I haven't pulled out a map in quite some time. I know where to eat. I know where to go get stuff. I told my wife I'm going to get a flat. She wasn't okay with that. She was like, "What's going on with that?" But I'm kidding. I'm not. But it's really fun, and I plan to make more trips. We've just hired our first London hire to help us out with the London market expansion.
Wow!
So we're really doing a lot. And first place, FNO. We're letting you know we actually just opened up our London office.
Wow!
Our London office.
Where? Mm-hmm. Yep. Where is it?
It is in the Lloyd's of London building.
You mean the actual 1 square block building? You're inside of it?
It is. It's in the building where the trading floor, the underwriting floor, the bell, the inside out building. We are in the building. We have an office suite in there. And boy, am I a kid in a candy factory. I have just been walking all around, looking at the history, looking at the art, um, just all thing insurance, because it's, I mean, just if you want to be a nerd in the insurance space, this is where it's at. And I'm loving it. I'm loving it. So it's 11, 12 floors of full insurance. But we're excited. We're excited. Really happy that Darren's on, and really happy that our office is open.
There's nothing quite like it in the United States. Lloyd's of
No.
London is not it's not made up of a bunch of people who are working for Lloyd's of London. Rather,
Right.
it's made up of people who are working for companies that are kind of members of Lloyd's of London, right?
Yeah, it's a marketplace. So people want insurance and they come to this marketplace and they say, hey, do you want to underwrite it? And then one syndicate will say, I'll take some. And another one will say, I'll take some. And you might have 6, 7, 8, 12, 15 people for a big ship, for example. A whole bunch of them might go in together and take a little piece of it. And it's kind of the greater good is coming to help the economy last and businesses happen and power plants go. And it is, there's not many places like it. But when you walk in and you see 100+ companies all in one location, all working together for the greater good, it's a really neat place.
Well, good luck to Alacrity and to you as you guys plant a flag in
Well, thank you.
in that market. And it's funny because I know that you've also had some touch with their business accelerator, Lloyd's Lab. And
Yes.
today's guest, who you won't be on the podcast
I
for the
won't be.
interview, today's guest is a graduate of Lloyd's Lab, Paige Roepers, the CEO and co-founder of Ocean Ledger, a very unique and unusual company that just went through the Lloyd's Lab experience.
I cannot wait to hear Paige's story and what they do in Ocean Ledger. And I can tell you, I actually sat through yesterday. I sat through about 24 companies giving a pitch, and they want to get in to Lloyd's Lab. And they're only going to take 10 or 12 of them. That's out of 100+ applicants. So it's a really hard thing to get into.
Right.
And all 24 of those companies were
Right.
outstanding. But
Right.
Lloyd's Lab is set up to really help out the Lloyd's market. So they bring in
Right.
these companies, they want to use them. And so for Paige to get included in that and to graduate it, that's a big deal. That's a big deal.
Well, the company is a fascinating play of data, science, and climatology and all kinds of things mashed together to figure the risks involved with coastlines. And of course, in the United States, as we know, that's a big question and a big issue and a big problem for many, many carriers. And so I think you'll really want to listen to what this company's about and what they're doing and where they're going.
I can't wait. It's going to be
Well,
great.
then let's wait no longer, and let's get to our interview with Paige Roeper, CEO, co-founder of Ocean Ledger. Hey, everybody. We are here with our guest coming to us all the way from
London, England. Not London,
England,
Ohio.
ladies and gentlemen. City of London, correct?
City of London.
And not just anywhere, but inside the Lloyd's building, the epicenter of insurance in Europe, I would dare say. Anyways, we're here with Paige Roepers, co-founder and CEO of Ocean Ledger. And we were chatting before we started that she's going to have to hold my hand through this podcast today because Lee's not here. And also, this is a rather unusual and remarkable company. And so let's, first of all, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
It's a pleasure. And especially for you to do this basically at night. What time is it in London right now?
Over here, it is 7:15. So it's a Wednesday. So peak pub hour.
Oh, yeah.
Around Lloyd's Market. Yeah.
For those of you who are familiar with the Lloyd's area, you'll know that at this time, in a few select pubs very close by,
in
There's
the
tons of people. There's tons of people with pints in their hands.
Yes, who have probably been there for 4 hours.
Oh, well, you go to where you get business done, right? Okay, so let's get started here and talk about Ocean Ledger, a unique name, a unique company. I'm going to task you with telling our audience what it is that Ocean Ledger is and what you guys do.
Sure. So we, as the name suggests, only care about what's happening along our coastlines. And that's not because we want to be difficult and niche. It's because when we think about the risks that anyone who owns, operates, or lends properties within that coastal zone, that nearshore environment, it's really, really complex to measure things, to understand where the vulnerabilities are, to predict, right, what damage might be. And so what Ocean Ledger does is we have the ability to really efficiently, really reliably take lots of different types of satellite images, so public, commercial, and translate that into insights on how bad the surge damage might be in a particular area, how that's informed by historical changes, where historical data is not useful from a weather perspective. It is when you look at shoreline change. And so we can pinpoint, almost a story of what's happened in this area, how well defended it is from certain coastlines, and, provide that insight to people across the risk cycle. So one of the key things that we also can measure and price into these models that look at, coastal flooding is the role of natural defenses. So I'm talking about mangroves and wetlands, and typically what is within the remit of governments and conservation groups. So we can kind of price that in within the elevation model we use to look at surge.
And so data is kind of the cornerstone of what you guys are working with.
At the core of it, we're a data provider, but we like to think of we go beyond providing raw data. We enable, because we're generating a lot of it in-house, we're able then to be flexible and look at different scenarios. So we're really focused on what are the problems, what are the questions, what are the things that people need to have more confidence around, to mitigate losses, to underwrite in areas that are really risky, and ultimately to have the confidence to know how to reduce those risks over time.
Mm-hmm. I would think that historic data to dealing with the areas that you're dealing with is important, but also problematic because of how things are changing. Is that accurate?
It's certainly accurate so the reason why people, maybe it's important to kind of double click on why people say that. It's because what we're saying is the climate change is creating, we live in a world of uncertainty, and a lot of that uncertainty from a risk modeling perspective comes from climate change. So what people are saying is the way that the frequency and the severity of storm cyclone events is not going to be true going forward. So that historical perspective is not as important. However, what we're doing is we're looking at what you call like almost the physical changes of a beach and a shoreline, where that actually is relevant because these are much more gradual and, again, like physical environmental processes that, going back to 1985 and seeing what the trends are with like erosion and forecasting that forward is a much more reliable type of measurement rather than looking at the storm data, which is what people normally reference as not useful.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned 1985. Why is that an important date for you guys?
It's an important date because that is the time scale we have access to through Landsat archives. So a huge amount of what our company is able to do today, and what many other companies are also able to do across the spectrum, is leverage public satellites, and Landsat being one of the most valuable programs to allow us to go back in time and do the analysis.
Because those are particularly helpful in coastal, the dynamics of coastal change.
Just the farther back you can go, the more data and the more context you have in a particular area. And we can measure these kind of, almost imagine we're taking a measurement every 50 meters along the shoreline. Being able to go back in time as far back as you can just gives you more confidence to know what, under a number of different scenarios, what might happen in the next 1 year, 2 years, 5 years.
So give me an example of a type of customer who would come to Ocean Ledger and the kind of problem that they would be presenting you with.
Yeah, so I can talk about it from a carrier perspective, and then I can maybe briefly talk about how it relates to broking and risk advisory. But essentially, someone will come to us and they will have licensed, 2 to 3, maybe more vendors that provide loss outputs and a number of different metrics across NatCat, right? So they'll have a book where they're writing wind, they're writing flood, and they have all these vendors and they're paying a lot of money for them. And the norm now, especially with things as complex as flood, is to have at least like 2 to 3 points of view, right? And so the problem is, however, that a lot of these models are using a lot, there are a lot of proprietary elements where there are differences, but a lot of them are using the same kind of pre-cooked public data set layers. And the way that they've been built makes it difficult to pull things apart and understand, well, why is there a difference between this score and why am I getting a big difference between 2 model vendors in the same area? Or why am I getting a big gap here? And so all of a sudden you're dealing with a black box and something that's really arbitrary. And in a soft market and in a competitive market and in highly exposed areas, it's really not good enough anymore. And so what we aim to do in the coastal, so anyone who has exposure within 10 kilometers of the coastline, is provide a kind of a more single source of truth to be able to understand how much they should weight these other model vendors, or whether they should even take our opinion over theirs in some cases. So what we would do is we would run our own search model. We would look at these historical changes. We'd pull out a number of different things we can measure to tell a story more objectively on what's happening in this area and what's the risk, in order to help them discern, how they should price, what reinsurance, if any, is required. And then, give this also to the cover holder, right? And have that be a reliable source of information for them to use throughout the course of the year. So that's how that would work from a carrier perspective. And it's really about over and underestimated risk, right? So where we try and identify where there's over and underestimation. From a risk advisory perspective, it's then thinking about, well, how can you use this much more precise information, this historical data, to inform risk transfer? So mostly it's public sector relevant, governments who are bearing the cost of demolition, of damage from these storms. Brokers and risk advisors would want to use this information, which is typically better than national data sets, in order to, we can very clearly show almost overlay, right, where we're better. But the key thing is that we can tell you where we're wrong. So a lot of national data sets won't tell you necessarily where they're wrong, just by virtue of being able to say, this is where the model's doing well and where it's not, provides confidence to the market, provides confidence to someone who wants to be able to spread out maybe the financial cost of events like these happening, even if the risk is kind of more gradual and what's not typically sold within the market, like erosion.
So you're providing opinions on other models, if you will?
We provide a much more objective view on what's happening within the coastal space in order to interrogate, to validate other models that are being used.
How can you say that yours is more objective?
So we can provide uncertainties across space and time with what it is that we're measuring. And we can also provide the underlying what we call the elevation data that goes into a surge model, whereas normally that's difficult to pull out. We're able to provide a much more kind of transparent view on what's plugging into that surge risk. And then the other aspect is that, and this is an ongoing process, is that we validate our, satellite derived data products with government data, with ground truth surveys. So, it's as close as you can get to actually putting someone on the ground, right? But the benefit is it's something that you can actually integrate and tweak within a modeling workflow.
And so the carrier is going to digest all that and make a decision about a particular risk?
The main use case is to say in areas where they're deemed to be too much risk, to say, well, here's, the diamonds in the rough. Here's areas where actually we have more confidence, there's more of a nuance happening, and we can underwrite some of these risks that others can't.
It's very interesting to me as, somebody's been involved in the claims side for a long time. We come in and clean up after a lot of these, after a lot of these disasters. And that's when you really, say, wow, they had a good underwriter, or wow, they had a bad underwriter, or maybe they had no underwriter, whatever it may be. But it's interesting to see the, what actually happens.
Yeah.
When it happens. But some companies will take on risks where other companies pass altogether. And I often wonder, do they know something or not know something that the other companies know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you must encounter that as you work with customers.
I think, with what we do, it's not gonna appeal to everyone's strategy, right? Like, we have to go after people that have a real business case, again, because they have a strong growth trajectory for that product, because they've obviously been hurt in a lot of areas and they just want to be better equipped to avoid those larger losses. And the good thing is, in the US, that's quite a hot topic, but that's very much just our application within insurance, right? A lot of what we do to provide that confidence in the case of an event happening, right? Like a loss happening, is, well, how do you also put in place measures to prevent the economic and then the insured losses from that happening, right? So, I'm not talking about early warning, but I'm talking about, much more proactive kind of risk management that will in turn benefit insurers, right? With the right amount of engagement.
So I want to talk about you in a couple of minutes, but I want to talk about your co-founders, who are both PhDs, I believe. Mm-hmm. Tell us what they do. But before you do that, tell us how this kind of started. I mean, it's an unusual grouping.
Yeah. Yeah. So my background, I guess Ocean Ledger is a reflection of me not being able to commit to two worlds that I'm very interested in. And the first one is rooted in the background I have in marine biology. So hence the ocean connection, and just, recognizing the benefits of a lot of these ecosystems, which, aren't frankly being priced into risk transfer, into risk financing in many cases. And then the fact that I didn't go down the path that most of my cohort went in terms of doing a PhD. I decided that I wanted to expand my horizons. So I worked in banking, I worked in consulting. I sold my soul just enough, I think, to understand that there was a market opportunity from a data perspective within this ocean space. Whether you're talking about, ESG reporting, or in the case of insurance, there's just a lack of data. I mean, quality data and standardized monitoring. So it just so happened now, 2 years ago, I came across my co-founder's paper, and he's the opposite of me. Spent about a decade looking at one particular issue and being very committed to it through his PhD and then a tech transfer project. And that was all about pretty much how do we use the latest and greatest of satellite data availability and machine learning and cloud computing to specifically, better understand how we can map and track these trends within a coastal environment. So anyway, I came across this paper. I was interested to learn more. I certainly wasn't like, yeah, let me start a company. But I think, once I spoke to him and I kind of understood the level of accuracy he was able to get to with remote sensing, which, has kind of a bad rap in many industries in terms of
Yes.
a lot of things, right? The frequency of updates. And so ISI's broken through a lot of that, which is great. And there's still a lot of limits. But my point is, it stood out to me. And, so we decided to go for it. And we spun out from the German Aerospace Center and initially started just focusing on the ecosystem mapping side. Our first customers were NGOs. We still work with governments. We still work with NGOs. It's a big part of, again, what we do across the risk cycle. And, but yeah, we kind of learned that, we can't create a problem, right? If we want to go sell to financial services, we need to back engineer. We need to figure out what's causing people pain and how does what we measure and what we do fit into that. And where we landed, surprisingly, in the coastal space has to do with flood, right? So I wouldn't call ourselves a flood risk provider, but more, any coastal environmental and physical risk is something that we want to take ownership on and across the data chain. So, eventually being able to have our own satellites and then owning the analytics and the downstream integration within the insurance industry. So we've evolved in the past just 6 months into looking at the insurance space. So we've made a lot of progress in that time and have lots more to do.
Wait. Your own satellites?
Well, that's like every girl's dream.
I've heard that so many times. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Well, it's I don't know, the Earth. Yeah, there's a lot happening and there's a lot of excitement in the commercial space, and there are a lot of amazing providers who have been able to launch missions much cheaper, defense and non-defense. And it just makes sense if you want to own elevation, you want to own elements of this risk space to be able to do that what you call upstream, which is, being able to procure the data from the source directly.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I would assume that would provide the business with a very particular kind of moat for itself. And I can understand why that would be a competitive advantage, certainly. And so when you launched, was the idea insurance?
No, the idea was we were interested initially in its application to natural capital like carbon credits, because it was such an obvious fit for the monitoring and the baseline assessment needed for some of these projects. So most of that industry is terrestrial, like forest projects. And there was a huge funding and technical gap for, mangroves and for seagrass. And so we thought that our tech could fill that gap, but very quickly realized there are a lot of other pieces of the puzzle that need to come together for that market, and that us alone, can't build a sustainable business. So it got me thinking about, like I said, just understanding where are the pain points within this coastal zone for people who are lending, for people who are insuring, for people who are operating assets. And insurance, because of its, track record with geospatial and cat models, seems like the best place to see, hey, can we add some value here? And like I said, for me, it's interesting because it connects to risk advisory, it connects to, public sector, to conservation work that's being done around flood defenses. So it really fit, I think, with where we started and where we want to end up.
Do you hear mostly from the United States? Or, a product like yours is certainly applicable anywhere in the world where there's coastline, of which there's a lot. So where does the interest in your company come from?
You ask for insurance at the moment, but where we have, I think, a strong competitive advantage is eventually expanding to markets where others are, like I said, quite reliant on good public data. You go outside of the US, UK is good, Australia is pretty good. Go outside in Asia Pacific, which is ground zero for Nat Cat and a huge growth market. They don't have these pre-cooked layers. And so our ability to kind of generate this from the ground up to some extent, I think, in time when the market matures a bit more and we mature, I think that's a really exciting space for us to go and expand into.
What does it mean that you're a dive master? I saw that you're a dive master at 18 years old. That must be unusual.
It's just the earliest age you can get it, and it's when I got certified.
You were in a hurry.
I was in a hurry. Yeah, I took every chance I could get as quickly as I could to dive as much as I could, because I knew I would end up selling my soul working in banking and doing something probably quite different. Basically, it's like the professional qualification before being an instructor. It allows you to, in certain situations, like take people diving and, know how to deal with like rescue. Hopefully you don't have to deal with.
Cool. So you dive in the Thames. What do you do? I mean, not too much.
In the UK, a lot of people dive in quarries, which actually in the US, I like to say I'm a fair weather diver.
Okay. Yeah, I get that. Yeah. I was a fair weather surfer. I love surfing in warm water. That's really nice. Not so much in cold water. Yeah. Okay. First of all, congratulations on you're part of a Lloyd's Lab cohort. Did you just finish, or are you in it, or where are you?
It finished in July. So it ran for 2 months from May through July. How
was that? And what got you there? I consider certain accelerators a real an honest to God validation, right? Not just a financial validation.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the fact that Lloyd's picked you guys up, that says a lot.
Yeah, it did say a lot. I'm extremely grateful that we went through that program. How did we get there? Yeah. So considering I hadn't even thought about insurance until I think it was January or February, the fact that we were kind of able to get into, and I don't know if Lloyd knows that, but anyway, the fact that we're able to pitch to the market and pitch something that they found interesting and go through this program made all the difference with, like I said, where we are now and the clarity we have going forward. But I've got to give credit to James, this guy who I worked with, who is, was an environmental underwriter and also broker for decades, Lloyd's market, and he's super passionate about kind of the role of or the mixture of like nature and its influence again on sort of pricing and risk advisory. I pretty much had him teach me the language.
That's cool. That's wonderful.
And so he sat next to me for about 2 to 3 days a week for 2 months, and he talked my ear off. I sat there and listened, and I learned. And then he introduced me to all the people he knows in the industry, which again, not coming from it, kind of essential. And then I learned from them. I learned from them, and I learned what questions to ask. I learned how to take the language I was speaking before and from a product perspective and completely rejig it. And then pretty much got to a point where I had a case to make to Lloyd's on paper, and then was able to make that in person and pitch, and they bought it. So
that's fabulous. I mean, one of the things about Lloyd's is it's insurance, and so they can understand the applicability of your product so much more than if you would have been in another accelerator somewhere else. Not to knock anybody, but I just think from a fit standpoint, Lloyd's Lab made a lot of sense. And like you said, I mean, the learning and the connections that you've made will take you a long way, I'm sure.
Yeah, most people say that again, it depends what stage you come into the Lloyd's program. And like you said, they're used to working with companies that have very little experience and exposure, knowing kind of what to do with that. But in that sense, right, within 2 months, right? You can they're good about saying, don't set crazy expectations, right? Like at the end of the day,
Mhm.
you're still within the insurance community. Just being in Lloyd's doesn't mean that everyone's going to fast track their checkbook.
Mhm.
What everyone says, it's the 4 months later, it's the 5 months later, it's the 10 years later, the relationships that you were able to form there and the credibility that ended up, paying off.
It's kind of like coastal change. It happens slowly over time.
Yeah, but in some areas and in some cases, it kicks off. And I think that is absolutely the case with, you'll meet someone maybe 2 months after the program and
Yeah.
they'll get it more than the 10 other people you spoke to. And they'll also be able to maybe even better understand the product than you did initially. And, that's a great thing about being here and being surrounded by all the major broking houses as well, that you get
Yes.
the ability to kind of casually meet people and let those serendipitous interactions lead you.
Yeah, and look at what we're doing. We're keeping you from the number one mixer that goes on every night of the week. Is it every night of the week? Pretty close.
With brokers, maybe, but normally it's Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday.
Wednesday's the big one, huh? Okay. Oh, it's Wednesday. There you go. Sorry about that. Next time we have you on, let's do it on a different day of the week, for God's sake. So will you stay? Are you all in London? Is that where you will run the company from, or what's the plan for the future in that regard?
The plan for the future is to keep the team lean for the next experiment. We're doing the POCs that we're doing with customers over the next 6 months, and those go well and we progress, then we'll hire maybe a couple more people, but London based at the moment, yes, to prove out, the company, the company's product. But we have a US entity, and so when we scale up further down the line, definitely makes sense to have a team based out in the US as well. But I think where we are now, again within Lloyd's and the other network that we have in the US, it's a good spread.
Are you doing the selling?
Yeah.
That must be an interesting education for you.
It is interesting. An education of people.
And patience.
And patience. Yeah.
Yes. I did that for a long time. I understand how that can feel.
Yeah. But I mean, it's really the best way to be faced with the realities of, are you solving a problem? Are you not solving a problem? Are you able to communicate? If you can't communicate things to people outside of the company, you certainly can't do it to people inside the company. And I find it really interesting, as much as possible, with the technical, and we're a small team, but to have as much cross-pollination on the problems and what people are currently doing today, because engineers and data scientists, when you don't prescriptively tell them what you need and you just tell them the problem, come up with the most creative ways to not just solve the issue, but to communicate it to people. So it's not always me going to them and saying, this is what I know. No. Often, actually, I find they tell me things that I put back to clients, and it ends up showing not just that expertise, but actually we can think about things in a way that they wouldn't have otherwise.
Good. That's the way that it should be. There's just a couple more things that I want to ask you about as we move on. Because of the complexity of what you guys are involved in, strategic partnerships must be part of how you're going to make all this work. Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, absolutely. We're also dipping our toe in a very crowded pool, right? Especially in the US. So,
yes,
for example, very large and established cat vendors, which are quite literally entrenched in how the insurance market operates and prices things.
Yes.
So, well, one, being aware of them, but also trying to make a case and say, hey, we're, again, a piece of the puzzle. We're niche. We're not trying to replace you. We're trying to, in ways that you wouldn't justify going down to our level, we don't justify going up to your level. So, let's work together. And we've been able to start a great conversation and relationship with cat risk and even other flood providers in the space. And so that's absolutely crucial because, again, also from a customer perspective, you don't want to be seen as an added, right? You want to be easy to work with and easy to integrate with what people are currently doing today. But then if you talk about sort of outside of insurance, right? Like as I alluded to, the public-private sector world that we are involved in, getting credibility from governments and working with governments is also really critical. And some of the companies who I think have done the best in gaining market acceptance with the data, whether it's used for cat modeling or for parametric, have been government grants, publishing papers, working with people who maybe don't have as much money to pay, right? But ultimately bearing the cost of a lot of these events and will be really stringent about who they choose to work with. So, like I said, we're doing sort of a contract with the government in Belize. We think about always doing government contracts in the US, in the UK, in Europe. It provides credibility and a positive network effect with the private sector market as a result.
Right.
And same with NGOs. So again, may seem really far off from the insurance market, but they are the ones that have relationships with people who own these, properties, these local governments, and they're doing a lot of the beach nourishment or wetland restoration work. So making sure that you have some level of approval from them and show some value to them is also quite critical.
I want to ask you about funding. You guys have raised some money. Is that on the docket for the near future again, or, without getting into too much detail?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we would look. We're focused on our next experiment, which are those POCs. So we're laser focused on that. But we're planning in 2026 to raise off the back of that and the rest of the developments that we've made in the last few months in the next 6 months. And like I said, the plan is eventually to scale up these POCs and experiments that we're doing across the US. So that's our first market. And so we're going to raise off the back of launching that product initially, being able to operate it, being able to improve it, being able to provide the level of flexibility that others can't. And yeah, but always getting grants in the meantime. It's a no-brainer for where we operate, again, being able to play the public sector card or the private sector card in terms of the need. So, we want to just extend our runway to give us the time to prove out the value and not rush too much the equity until we've got 100% all the proof points we need to scale things up.
Well, when you come to the United States, look us up. We'd love to follow up this podcast with how your POCs go.
Yeah.
That will be fascinating because I'm sure that there will be a ton of learning in that.
Yeah.
And in both directions. And so let's do that. All right.
Where are you guys based again?
Well, I'm in California and my co-host is in Texas. Okay. But we interview people all over the world, like yourself, for example.
Yeah. Very so,
but listen, I want to thank you so much for being here today. Lee Boyd for not being here. You missed a good podcast. And we wish you all the best. And again, congrats on how it went at Lloyd's. And we'll look forward to hearing about your future.
Amazing. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the questions.
You got it. You got it. Bye now.
Bye.
A really fascinating episode today. Totally different, unusual, and sorry you weren't there.
I am very sorry I wasn't there. I wanted to be. I can't wait for it to be released, and I can't wait to hear it.
Well, stay tuned because it's coming.
I will.
For all of you who are hearing this, it's already here. So
it's happened, and I'm sure it's great.
We're in a number of different time zones right now here, folks.
It's all crazy right now.
But big thanks to Paige for being with us today, and to Ocean Ledger for making this happen. And big thanks to you for being here as always. And until next time, we'll say,
Goodbye, everybody.